Okay, so let's begin with nanotechnology. And I drive here, I think, right? Okay. So this is an overview of some of the different areas that we're working on in our group. And uh, we work on composite materials, and we've worked on composites for the space shuttle that have gone through space approval. This is an astronaut working on one of the surface materials in space, but not really, because that's not really a microwave gun. That's just a water gun that I photoshopped in. They wouldn't show me the real microwave gun because it's proprietary. So we actually developed the composite to work with a microwave gun, and they won't show me the microwave gun because it's proprietary. Work on carbon fibers, collaborate some with Dr. Satish Kumar, who's here. We work on carbon nanotubes. This is a roach leg that we converted into graphene. Single sheet of carbon by heating it up to 1,000 degrees on a copper foil, because roaches are made out of carbon just like we are, and you just restructure it differently and you can make graphene out of it. We work on radome coatings that didn't show up. We work on a lot of things for the oil and gas industry to make things more efficient. We've made, just this past year, we made transparent invisible memory, so you could have embedded within glass and flexible plastic, not just a conductive touchscreen display, but also the memories can now be embedded in that. So we work in that area. We do a fair amount on the medicinal side. Tomorrow I'll be talking about carbon for traumatic brain injury and stroke, some of the hottest drug that's ever been seen for this area. And we work on capturing radioactive elements from the environment to clean up legacy sites. And we work on also, I'll be talking about this tomorrow, where we can take a single sheet of graphene and grow nanotubes seamlessly out of the graphene. But with that, that's the overview of what we do. And here's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. And these are NanoCars. Here's a picture of one of our NanoCars. This is from Die Zeitz magazine in Germany. We sent them a picture of one of our NanoCars. And you see the four wheels of the NanoCar here, and it's 9.4 times 10 to the minus 24 kilograms. That's I don't have to tell people at Tech how small that is. That's a really small number. But in case there's anybody here who doesn't go to Georgia Tech and has never had the pleasure of studying at Georgia Tech, that's like 24 point and then 24 zeros and a 9.4 or something like that. It's a very small number. This is 280,000 kilograms. So after I show you about NanoCars, I'll discuss why we might want to make these when we can already have these. And a human being stands about that high relative to this vehicle that's used in coal mining. So we make NanoCars, but we make lots of these. To give you an idea of how many we make of these, in a single reaction flask, we make 10 to the 23rd at a time, which you know is a big number. Let me put this in perspective. One swallow of water is 18 milliliters. 18 milliliters of water is 1 mole of water. 1 mole of water is 6 times 10 to the 23rd molecules. If instead of having one swallow of water, if we put this, say, with sheets of paper, if one had sheets of paper and say you had a stack of paper that's 500 sheets high, you stick it in your inkjet printer, and that's 2.5 inches high. Instead of having 500 sheets of paper, you had 6 times 10 to the 23rd sheets of paper, or a mole of paper. That stack of paper reaches from the Earth to the Sun 400 million times. So a mole is a big number. We make this a mole at a time. So we have many of them, and we'll capitalize on the many. This is how we make NanoCars. This was our 4th generation NanoCar. And we start with orthobromoaniline. We iodinate, put a TMS acetylene on, and we build up the structure in this way. And then we go ahead and build up the axles, and then we put on the fullerene wheels. And so what you'll notice about this NanoCar, it's the same top and bottom. This was designed in, so it doesn't matter how it lands on a surface. The front and the back, forward and reverse, is the same, so it doesn't matter which direction it would start going. We call this the Z NanoCar because when I was in high school, I wanted, and only a few of you are going to remember this, I wanted a Datsun 240Z. and I never was able to get one. But when you design your own car, you can name it whatever you like. So we named this the Z car, and it kind of looks a little bit like a Z. But this was our 4th generation car, so it has fully rotatable axles. And also the axles can rotate 360 degrees relative to the chassis due to these single bonds here. And this is important. My sons, when they were growing up, they had these cars where the axle could spin 360 degrees relative to the chassis. You know, these are little electric cars. That helps them to climb up steps. And we needed the same thing here, so we built that feature into these as well. So this is what they look like on an atomically smooth surface. And again, I've lost the resolution in the PC to the Mac conversion here. But anyway, so here's, they actually look much better. This surface should be covered just like this. And they're facing in this direction. They're going to turn and move across here. They're 3 nanometers by 2 nanometers. And this is important. We built them as rectangles. And we built them as rectangles because we can tell then the directionality. Which direction are they moving? Because if we didn't build them as a rectangle, if they were a square, we wouldn't know which direction they're going. So this is actually going to turn and move across this surface. Okay, so they're starting to move here. Here it is. And really, the resolution on a PC would have been a whole lot better, but there it is. And there's the first nano collision ever recorded right there. And so this is on atomically smooth gold. Now, many people had said that when we started doing this, this would be like a car on ice. It would have no directionality. It's just going to slide. That turns out not to be the case. We were very fortunate it didn't turn out to be the case, because subsequently we made other nano cars where that occurred, and then we understood what we had to do to have the equivalent of friction at the nano level. And a fullerene gives about a 2 EV bond strength. That's about 45 kilocalories per mole per fullerene to the gold surface. And because of that, these roll rather than slide across the surface. And we furthermore know that because when we built the trimer of this nano car, when we built this trimer, it only rotates, it only pivots on axis. So if these were like a car sliding on ice, these should slide just as well. But they don't. Only the four-wheeled ones translate. These pivot on axis. And so it's a feature that we built in, so we know that these are translating. We can watch them translating. Once they get going, they continue in that direction. Here's where you see a feature of the suspension where it goes up 1 atomic step on the gold. These are 1 atomic step of high islands and comes back down the other side. And that's a feature of that of the axles relative to the chassis. Now, many people said you don't have a nano car until you have a motor. So we had to build in a motor, and so we built in these motors. And the idea is that these motors would act as a rotator, which would push these along like a paddle wheel. And the reason that these rotate in only one direction when you shine light on them is because they have a stereogenic center right here. So there's 2 elements of isomerism here. There's the atrope isomerism, the twisted double bond, and then there's a chiral or stereogenic center right there. So when this is photolized, it goes to an orthogonal state. And once it's in this orthogonal state, it can relax either way back down. But because of the nearby stereogenic center, those 2 orthogonal states can go in diastereotopic over diastereotopic transition states. That means different energy transition states. So it keeps going over the lower energy side, and it rotates in one direction. And so we built that feature into the nano car. So this is how we did it. We start with these small molecules and build it on up, and we make first the rotor, we make the stator, and then we couple them together to make the motor. Then we put these end groups on to stick them onto these axles. And then we assemble the nano car. Now this nano car has a 3 megahertz rotation, so you shine light on it, it spins 3 million rotations per second. So this is something that you can't get out of a macroscopic motor, but there are these sort of features that can be built in. So we have these cars, we have motors, we've built about 25 different models of vehicles. We've built nano backhoes that can grab an element. We've built nano trucks that have a loading bay of a porphyrin loading bay to be able to carry things. But then the question comes, why NanoCars? Why do we want to do them? At a place like Georgia Tech, what are they good for? Well, what is this good for? What is Mona Lisa good for? What does Mona Lisa do? Right? What does it do? It's aesthetically pleasing. It makes us happy when we look at it. We wonder, is she looking at me or isn't she? What was Leonardo da Vinci thinking when he spent his life working on this? In academia, we don't have to have an application. We can do something just because it's intellectually interesting, and we should never forget that. This is what the academy is for. This is what funding should be for, that we can do things that are just intellectually pleasing. And this is intellectually pleasing. Nonetheless, these certainly have applications. So for example, you look at a tree. This tree was made from the bottom up, so that we as people, if we want to make a podium, what do? We go out, we find a tree, we cut it down, we build a podium. That's top-down fabrication. That's generally how we build. Everything in nature is built from the bottom up if it has complex assembly. And in order to be a complex design, in order to be a thinking person, in order to be an insect, in order to be able to have logic and intelligence and thought and function, one has to have disordered assembly. A rock, AB, AB, a stone, a mineral, AB lined up, or AAA, all lined up. This is simple structure. You can get that by thermodynamics. You can get assembly like that. AB, AB, you can get that sort of assembly, but you have to have disordered, non-regular assembly in order to have complex function. This is what we are. We have all sorts of different pieces that work together. And how does nature do this if you can't just do it spontaneously by thermodynamics, by having molecules assemble into higher order structures like this? You do it with machines. And in nature, it's done with nanomachines, which are called enzymes, where it takes certain molecules and puts them into place so that the bagel that you ate this morning becomes part of your ear this evening. How does that happen? The molecules are broken down, and they're assembled in other places that they need to be assembled into. The breaking down is by enzymes, and the enzymes reconstruct. That is nature's nanomachines. If we want to be able to build sophisticated structures ex vivo, outside of the body, I don't think that these are going to be good for in the body, because these are really small, 2 nanometers by 3 nanometers. This is plankton to a white blood cell. This is very small. But we're going to have to be able to assemble. If we're going to use it in vivo, we're going to use things that look like enzymes. They work quite well. But ex vivo, where enzymes don't work very well, then we have to be able to have structures that can build things. So can we begin to be able to pick things up and do assembly? Can we be able to pick things up and have higher order assembly constructed before our very eyes? This happens biologically. Enzymes do this. We are ubiquitous going around, and there's this construction. You look at the trees out there, they've been made the same way. All of this. Well, can we build buildings like this so that in 100 years or 200 years we build skyscrapers this way? Could it be? Or is this just all science fiction? Don't dismiss it, because everything in nature that has complex function is built this way with nature's little nanomachines. Can we program nanocars to assemble so that instead of building buildings like this, as we've been building for the last 5,000 years, where we bring in bricks and sticks and mortar, can we just bring in raw materials and have cars just assemble it? This is what enzymes do. This is how that tree formed, not from some larger tree being cut down, but from the bottom up. And the sophistication in a tree or a blade of grass is more than the technological sophistication in this building. Some strains of grass grow 2 feet tall in a single day. So actually you can do bottom-up assembly quite quickly. You look at the growth rate of a carbon nanotube. Very fast growth, but that's regular assembly. So look at DNA, the growth rate of DNA. Extremely rapid assembly. These things can occur very rapidly. This is what we want to do. This is what we envision with nanocars. If we can learn to understand motion, if we can learn to control that motion, which we've done with electric fields, electric field gradients. If we can learn then to program them with electric fields to pick something up and drop it off, well, what will we make initially? Well, we'll just pick up 50 atoms and drop it off in a pile, and that will be a quantum dot memory. 1 bit. But that's a construction. We start small and then start building up smaller structures from there. So that could it be in 100 years or 200 years that we would use nanocars to build in that very way, just as enzymes do, because there is nothing magical about biology. It is sophisticated, it is complex, but we can understand it. And can we start to mimic it without using the tools of biology, using other tricks that we have, and design other structures to build buildings, things that we like to live in? So that's nanocars. So there is the summary of different features that we've built. We've built motors and sensors and actuators. We've built in actually suspension, directionality, all different kinds of wheels, different fuel sources. We have chemically powered motor cars. We have thermally powered. We have light powered. We have different cargo transporters. So all of these features have been built in. But what I'd like to do now is to tell you, first of all, how I became interested in chemistry. I didn't grow up becoming interested in chemistry. What happened to me? What was the transition that I went through to be in the position that I am today? How did I become interested in chemistry? And I wanted to be a New York State trooper. That's what I wanted to be. When I was in high school, I just had this vision. I wanted to be a New York State trooper. But it turned out that I couldn't get into the academy. And I couldn't get into the academy because I'm colorblind. And I don't know what the rules are today. I suspect you could be a paraplegic and become a state trooper these days. But at the time, you couldn't be colorblind and become a state trooper. And so I thought I'd go into criminal science, work in a crime lab, at least somehow be related to that sort of field. But my father gave me some advice. He said, why don't you, instead of going into criminal science, why don't you just get an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and then you can specialize after that. And I don't know what came over me, being 17 or 18 years old, but I listened to my father. and it actually turned out to be really good advice, because then I found organic synthesis. As a sophomore organic chemistry student, I started falling in love with synthetic chemistry. I would sit on Friday evenings when everybody else was out doing other things, and I would just solve problems in the book that had never been assigned. And then I started going beyond that and taking graduate textbooks and trying to solve the synthetic problems in there. I loved doing organic synthesis, and I thought, this is wonderful. It's just wonderful to do this. And so I went to graduate school, and I started pursuing a field in chemistry. So this is how I became a chemist.